Okay, hello there, traders. Welcome back to the TOGS Trading Podcast. This is season 2, and we are up to TOGS 30 already, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're well. I hope you have enjoyed the rather eventful last couple of weeks, all right, of markets, trading, geopolitical, and it leads us into our session today. So we're doing this on Wednesday the 6th. So it is the kind of lunchtime after the US election yesterday. Okay, so we've got a result, and we'll as good a result, and we'll talk about it in a moment. This session was all about US election special. What now, really? What now? Because, regardless of any political shenanigans, ultimately we're just traders and they really just want to see where's the opportunity. So, as always, I am joined in that chat by my friend Big Ian. Looking good, Billy Ray. How are you doing?
Thank you very much. All right. Yeah. I'm complaining. Really, I'm on my own. My wife has gone to Germany for the week.
Oh.
So, it's just myself and my son. So I have to go and pick him up later on, and that's about it. So it's sitting around the house in our underwear watching action films. That's all. And eating pizza probably or something. That's probably all we're going to be doing over the next little while.
That doesn't sound too bad. Interestingly, I was in London at the end of last week, okay, and I had a couple of pints with a couple of pals and friends in the Devonshire and Soho. Okay, good Irish pub, very very busy, but good Guinness. And interestingly, a couple of guys came along who were traders and also listened to the podcast. They gave us some great feedback, really enjoy it, and they also sort of raised the question or the suggestion that perhaps maybe we should do like a kind of in face-to-face sort of podcast or meetup. All right, okay, so the guy said they'd love to come and have a pint in Dublin with ourselves, etc. So maybe we'll do that in the new year. Maybe we'll have a TOGS podcast meetup, one in London and perhaps one in Dublin and stuff. People could come and have a good Guinness and a bit of a chat about trading and stuff. So if are interested in that, by all means, please let us know in the questions or comments box. We'd really appreciate any of that kind of feedback. You up for that, Ian?
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Could be quite fun.
Yeah, I think so. I think so as well. I don't think we'd be short of things to talk about. No. Over a few pints in a pub and stuff. And let's face it, I mean, that's how this podcast started, with us just having a couple of pints in a pub and talking about trading, didn't it? So it's it would be a natural evolution, all right. And we've run and held meetups in Liverpool, Dublin, London, etc. So we'll do that. All right, early next year I'll plan that in. Okay, so keep posted, and if you'd be interested and you'd like to sort of be a part of that, kept up to date in that, sort of just put it in the comments box, etc. And we'll make sure that you're included. All right, so US election special there, Ian. What are your thoughts so far? Now, as I said, we're recording this Wednesday lunchtime, London time. So, we've had the night, okay. Of course, this goes out on Thursday, and undoubtedly there'll be maybe some shenanigans and some changes, but based on what we know here, what have you made of it all so far, Ian?
Mostly I was quite surprised, actually. As I was saying just before we went live there, I had to run upstairs and rejigger all my notes because I actually really thought that Camilla would win. And I sort of had done everything out for that. I didn't expect Trump to win, and I didn't expect him to win by such a margin, which for American politics seems to be almost a landslide. And a very interesting thing, I think, it's the most interesting election in the US in my lifetime, or at least as an adult, because I wouldn't have been that interested in the 1980s and what was going on in the US. It's because it's more than an election. It's a cultural shift, really. Yep. It's cultural because we've had years now, sort of the woke, that sort of liberal policy type stuff, and that seems to have hit a roadblock for the first time. So I think there's going to be a big cultural shift over the next 4 years. So I think it's much more. There's going to be big economic consequences. There's going to be big stock market consequences, but on top of that, I think there's going to be big social changes over the next few years. Some will be good, some will be bad, but it is what it is. Yeah, it's a new world this morning. Really, I think it's a completely new world this morning.
I'm agreeing with you. All right, I'm agreeing with you. So I I did a piece of my kind of Monday market updates, which you can get access to on the togspod.com website, ladies and gentlemen. I did a piece about 3-4 weeks ago about the emergence of the Trump trade, all right, and I talked about specific instruments that were worth watching, and that I felt were already starting to show what the markets thought about in terms of the likely result, and we can go into the details of that a little bit later on. I didn't do a session on the Harris trade, and that might give you an inclination of my own particular thoughts and views, and about what the likely result, or what I hope the result would be. But I was like you. I thought that despite wanting one side to win, I thought that Harris might nick it, and that they were banking upon a tsunami of young Liberal women to come and vote Harris into power. And whilst there has been an uptick in that, from the data I've seen at the moment, it was not even young women didn't vote for Harris in the numbers that they were expecting. Now, of course, we'll expect to see the full data on that and stuff, and that might well change. But at the moment, that's it. And I think that probably just that in itself tells you about the, in my view, in terms about the kind of, let's say, about the weakness of one of the candidates. But I would agree, there's a cultural shift there, and it's now you're right. And of course, I don't include myself as an expert on US elections, but not only is he winning the electoral college, but at the moment it looks like he's winning the popular vote. It looks like he is he's winning the Senate, he's winning Congress, and he's also the kind of Supreme Court is in his favor as well. I please correct me if I'm wrong, but that to me would look as much of a clean sweep as you can possibly get in American politics. But that's me as an outsider viewing in. I'm very happy to be corrected upon that if that's not the case. But then, if that is the case, that sets us up for a very interesting few years, I think, doesn't it, Ian?
It does. It does. I think, to go down to you, she wasn't the most inspiring candidate that they could have put out. I think it was all a bit jumbled up, the whole thing with the Democratic Party. It just, Obama, which I didn't like. I didn't like Obama at all, but I would recognize that he had something. He was a showman. He was great in front of a camera. He was quite inspiring. You could feel the sort of whatever off him, like. But I don't think that translated to her. She just wasn't. She was just blander or something. She didn't come out and do all the interviews she could have done. I don't think I've ever seen her interviewed, actually. I just seem to have missed it, where I've seen Trump, at least, on Rogan and that kind of stuff, Joe Rogan and things.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, it's going to be, the markets are flying this morning. They've shot up overnight. And traditionally that's what they do, is for the next 4 months, there should be basically a bump in the stock market of 2 to 10%, something like that. I've read historically, except at times when I was looking at the numbers, except at times when there was something other economic, excuse me, something else economic going on. They generally got a bump. So I'd be definitely looking at the next pullbacks that's going to be in the stock market. I can definitely see that's going to be a thing, because trends aren't really defined by just going up. Trends are not defined by going straight up. It's not really the up that defines them. It's what they hold when they come back. You can tell how strong a trend is by where it holds and how it holds, much more than just going straight up, because things that go straight up are quite weak often. And that's why I think, you have that higher low, and the higher low is going to technically define the trend. I think there's some stocks, some of the things, like when I was getting ready thinking that it was going to be Camilla, I just thought they'd chop around for the next few months, because I didn't think that because we were going to get like 4 more years of the same, and I thought that there wouldn't be anything spectacular. The 2 areas that I thought would probably do well if she had won war was the defense stocks, because they will continue to have wars. And gun stocks, because what would happen with gun stocks like Ruger, Smith & Wesson, that kind of thing, which traditionally happens with them, is that if she'd won the election, they would have gone down this morning, and then they would have gone up quite dramatically. That's almost parabolic. I've seen them do it parabolically in the past. And the reason behind that is now you have 4 more years to go out and buy your AR-15, and it's probably going to get easier to go out and buy your AR-15 or your handgun or whatever you want to buy. Where if it was Camilla, they'd have to do it in the next 4 months. So that sort of delayed purchases would have been, people would have run to the gun shops and emptied them of bullets and guns. And that's not going to happen now because they're going to sit there, they're going to look at it, they're going to, in fact, probably wait a little bit longer to see what Trump does with it to make it easier for them. You know, they might have to get rid of their 443 form and all that kind of stuff. So they won't do anything. Ruger is not going to sell an extra gun in the next 6 months because he's there, which seems counterintuitive to a lot of people. You know, they always think, oh yeah, you can do it now, but no, it's people delay the purchases because an AR-15 is between $600 and $2,500, depending on the model and type you get. So they're quite expensive. They're laptop expensive. So if you don't really need a new laptop, you're not going, and you know you have 4 years to get the laptop, you put it there until you can really afford it, and that's going to be a big thing. And then the next thing I thought was the tariffs really are the big question. And you know, when I was thinking about it, I also realized that we have a tariff in Ireland. We have it on cars. We have a thing called VRT, vehicle registration tax. So if I went to the UK and bought a car, they're substantially cheaper in the UK than they are to buy here. Or in the north of Ireland, I could simply drive over the border and get a car probably 30% cheaper than I can buy it here. But once I try and register that car in Ireland, I'm going to end up paying a thing called VRT, vehicle registration tax. And that is basically going to make up probably 20-30% of the purchase price of the car. So there would be no saving between buying it in the north and buying it in Ireland. And consequently, that cost has been passed on to me at the end of the day. And that's what happens a lot of with tariffs as well, is that the cost simply gets passed on to the consumer eventually. Might create more jobs, but you know, it will increase the cost of living in some items.
Yeah. No, I'd agree with you there. And it's, listen, regardless of your political views on Mr. Trump, okay, I know some of us love him, some of us loathe him, that's fine. Markets have loved him. And, you know, you can see this morning, or if you're like me, up a bit too late, I think I was up to about 2:30 in the morning, then back up at 7:30 and stuff, and watching markets, watching the news, and watching the kind of, let's say, the sort of liberal mainstream media sort of, you know, go into a little bit of a meltdown as the numbers will start coming out. That entertainment itself was worth staying up to watch. But what we've seen is, you know, you've heard, for people who are at the start of their trading journey, markets are like humans. We hate uncertainty, and as you know, as we start to get certainty about the sort of result, well, then, you know, we've had a bit of a relief rally, and you know, stock indexes have been going up. The dollar has been strengthening there. Even yields, you know, this was certainly overnight this morning. They were yields were rising and stuff in terms of US Treasuries. We also had some of the stocks kind of looking like they're going to be gapping in pre-market. So, as I said, I did a thing about 3-4 weeks ago about on the Trump trade, and so one of them was like dollar Mexican peso. All right, that had been pivoting around 20. That's kind of leaving 20 now. All right, we had Tesla. Okay, I was saying Tesla was going to be rise on his win, but could get absolutely hammered if Harris had won, because Musk had basically, he nailed his colours to the mast and stuff, you know, for Trump. And if Trump didn't win, he was getting, you know, he was going to get absolutely battered and stuff. But then also some defence stocks. Interestingly, I was looking at this morning some of the European defence stocks, so like British Aerospace, a couple of the others, they've gone up. And then, of course, you realise that actually, you know, if Trump basically has a negotiated settlement for Ukraine, if he basically puts the thumb on Zelensky and says, right, come on, you know, sort this, well, then invariably what happens is that Europe has to start looking to defend itself, all right, because Trump, and I personally agreed with him, when in his last time here, Trump said, why am I spending all this money, and why am I spending, you know, my young American kids' lives defending Europe when you're not prepared to do the work or spend the money on it yourself. And I thought that was a perfectly reasonable discussion. And I was saying to some of my friends this morning, if I was the CEO of any European defence makers, I'd be on the phone to the prime ministers and presidents of my respective countries in Europe, saying, Trump's won, he'll pull the rug. I think you need to send some money my way and up your defence spending and stuff. So there will be a huge sort of kind of knock-on. I could, in terms of you saw about defence spending, I could see it maybe drifting in the US, but actually lifting elsewhere as other countries start to realise, oh, hang on a minute, I'm going to have to pull my weight here, etc. But certainly markets, they've had that relief rally. My view would be we have FOMC tomorrow night, or rather it'll be Thursday evening. I would probably caveat that I would just wait to see what Powell has got to say, okay, in terms of A, what they do, and B, his hints for the kind of future trajectories. And that would probably be, after that, then I'd be starting to look to build bigger positions in some of the kind of stocks sectors that will do well. Tech will do well. Okay, and so I'd be looking at that, etc. There will be opportunity, isn't it? There will be opportunity, and that's like XLE. All right, I think that was looking to sort of gap up. Okay, energy stocks. All right, XOM. All right, all of those. These, they will do well. All right, under a Trump administration, as opposed to a Harris, what could have been a Harris administration. So there is opportunity. There is opportunity. There is always opportunity, and now it's a case of over the next 48 hours starting to sort of build a plan about how we enact on that, how we look for that, isn't it?
Definitely, I wouldn't rush. That's one of the big things with defence stocks, because one of the other things too, which I thought with defence spending, is that they've emptied their larder basically over the last few years. Like they've sent so much stuff to the Ukraine. I've always really been thinking about the Americans, and 75% of the stuff that they sent to the Ukraine was out of date. Yeah. So they would have had to dispose of it anyway, because you can only keep a certain amount of that stuff. Like if you keep which happens to the Russians, if you keep a missile on its side, the propellant will eventually start to degrade, and then it'll start to shift towards the bottom, and that means your missile will come out and go straight down and explode.
Most of the weapons time expired, getting to the end of their time expired, so they were going to get trashed. So you might as well give them to them and let them batter away with it.
In fact, I think, to be quite honest with you, they might have saved money on disposal.
Yeah, probably. Yeah,
I mean, it's expensive.
You're probably right there.
Yeah. So I think there could be a bump there from those two things. Yep. What I was going to say, just with Tesla, I was wondering about Tesla, because like my son goes to a private school, right? So there's a lot of Tesla drivers in the private school, and they're all middle-aged white men, which you would assume would be also liberal. So if you have Elon Musk coming out and battering his flag to the flagpole, are those people going to continue to buy Teslas? Because it is in itself an act of support of not just the environment, if you want to look at it from that point, but it's Musk. You are supporting Musk. Basically, at the end of the day, you're making his company better. And I was wondering, is that something that's going to upset them over the next while, I think. But then again, Musk is also diversified into other things like space, and he owns Twitter, and Twitter has been, I think in my own way, it's been a powerhouse in the last 6 months, really, for its ability to have a free press. Twitter has been the only place where people can go in and talk about it, because there's been other things that have been set up like Rumble, but they've never really been that successful. But Twitter was there. It was big. It had a big user base. And I think to a certain extent it has been very successful and very, very important in the last few months. So maybe something will come out of that. I don't know.
I think that's probably also a reflection of what this most definitely has. I think an election, and once again, this is me speculating more so than being an expert, is that we have seen a dethroning of the mainstream media and the throning of new media. There's an awful lot of, as you say, it carried through Twitter. Also, that moment where basically Joe Rogan interviewed Trump, and whether you love him or loathe him, the guy turned up unscripted and sat and talked for 3 hours. All right, so you can't stay scripted for 3 hours. Do you know what I mean? You can't hide yourself. He just sat and chatted away for 3 hours and stuff. And I think it was noticeable that basically, I think there was something like 10 million views in 24 hours or something they got afterwards, and then invariably the Harris campaign. A, wouldn't do it, but then B, when they realised that they kind of, it didn't look good for them not to do it, it was basically Rogan had to go to her. Rogan was only allowed an hour, and I think there was some sort of pre-created softball questions and stuff that were the art of the conversation. And I think he sort of said, "Well, no, no." And I think it was a moment that people saw that basically she had nothing to offer, that campaign had nothing to offer, but also that Rogan had the power. A guy in his podcast had more power than the incumbent media companies and stuff, and I think that will have terrified. I'm pretty sure that will have terrified them. But once again, that's my view. People might differ if they do. I'm always happy to hear a counter argument. I have no issue. I'm a trader. It's what makes a market. All right, so I'm always happy. I have no issue with that. But I think that has also been one of the things that I think will take away in terms of there has now been a shift. All right, in terms of who holds the power.
No, definitely. I think if I can remember correctly, it was 1.5 million views in the first hour. And then he was accusing, I saw something with him accusing YouTube of shadow banning it. So it was very difficult to get. It was like hard to find under normal search terms. And I wonder will the traditional media ever catch up? And I have a funny feeling that it's going to take there are two things. One is places like Hollywood have not been doing that well over the last couple of years because they brought out films that have an agenda, perhaps, and I think that people have not gone to see them because they don't speak. They don't speak to a lot of people. A lot of the Hollywood stuff that's been out recently. If you look at films that are classics, a lot of the time you have this stoic male who goes off and does something, and there's been nothing like that for a long time. And it'll be interesting as well to see what government response will be if they do start changing, because they'll have to change because of money. Eventually, I think there's going to have to be something because everybody has to make a living. Yeah. So they'll have to do some sort of change. And then there's a lot of problems with free speech. I mean, take the UK. I saw something there one time. It was 3,300 people were arrested for Facebook posts.
Yeah.
Which seems slightly tyrannical to me, to be quite honest with you.
I would not disagree with you there. All right, I would not disagree with you there. They've kind of released hardened criminals, rapists, etc., to make room in the prisons for people who've put hurty words on Facebook and stuff, and that's already coming back to bite them in the arse, because I think. Once again, if someone has the better numbers than me, but it was something like 40% of those people they released have already reoffended and are back in or something. But to bring it in the UK's perspective into the election piece, I said saying in my Trump take piece about a month or so ago that I thought a Trump victory would be good for the world but bad for the UK, and I thought a Harris victory would be bad for the world but could have been good for the UK, mainly because basically, as we can see, the markets are lifting, and invariably what will happen is basically they will become a sponge, and free capital, I think, will just flow back to the US. Okay, in one way or another, people will want to be part of US tech companies, US stock market, and that money will leave not only established economies like the UK, but other parts of the world as well. Basically, the US will hoover everything up. But then also, what we had here, you might not have known or seen, is that there was already problems between Trump and Starmer because the Labour Party had sent out like 100 people, I think 100 Labour activists to do campaigning for Harris. And, this was found out, and Trump made a thing of it, and they basically all had to go home with their tails between their legs. Trump, to me, isn't the kind of guy who's going to forget something like that. He's not going to forget that basically Starmer's government or Starmer's people were trying to vote, trying to campaign for Harris. I think that will come back to hurt Labour and probably hurt the UK. the only thing that might help is the fact that, from what I can see and read, Trump doesn't like Macron. He doesn't like Tusk in Poland. He probably likes the Pole, but he doesn't like Tusk. He doesn't like what's the name of the EU, and the German government is probably likely to might have collapsed in the next couple of weeks, and that could all change there. I think his new friend will be what's her name, the Italian is it Meloni in Italy? Her and Musk seem to get on very, very well, and I think that's where it'll be his friend. But I think it'll have a short-term detrimental effect for the UK. How it'll affect Ireland, I don't know. You
I think it'll be worse. I think it'll be worse for us, to be quite honest with you, because we're a tax haven. A lot of our GDP is simply warehousing profits, and also on top of that, again, going to my own son's private school, like half the daddies in there work in some tech company down in Sandyford, and all those tech companies. There's one thing I wanted to say just before I started with the bringing money back to the US. I believe that money will go back to the US and be taxed there. But that does not mean that the companies will make more money. It's just where they're going to pay tax. So you're not going to see it's not going to cause a boom in the stock market. It's just they're going to sell the same amount of stuff. They're going to pay the same amount of tax. It's just who's benefiting. And at the moment, it's us. In Ireland, we were really benefiting from it. We have every major tech company has their European headquarters in Ireland, if not their world headquarters in Ireland. And that makes sense. We're English speaking. Time zones you can work with the time zones here. It makes sense. But how long is that going to last now? I don't know. It could take them a couple of years, but if it becomes, because if they continue and it comes a Republican person the next time, they have 8 years to make those changes, it could be really detrimental. But it will be detrimental. I think it will be bad. I don't think it'll be detrimental, but it will be bad for Ireland in the long term. That we are going to lose this simple money because it was just tax being paid. We didn't do anything for it. We didn't create anything for it. We just allowed people to hide their money, and that's going to be. We were the Switzerland of the British Isles, really. I think. So I think it's going to be.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing, just one other thing I want to say about the locking people up, it shows the priorities of a government, and I mean, the communist government, Stalin had the same priorities. He punished political crimes, which is effectively free speech, much more than he punished traditional crimes like thievery. So it's, it just shows a priority, really, I think, to be quite honest with you. So actually I have to go turn my pages and see what else I wanted to talk about.
No, that is an interesting point about Irish tax, etc., and stuff about where they're going to pay it, because I think it will follow up a double attack, because you've already had Paris and Berlin always hated those American companies being in Dublin. They always hated them. They thought those companies should be in Paris and Berlin, those head office rather than Dublin, and that was one of the drivers for the what's it called? Is it the CCTB, the Common Core Corporate Tax initiative or what have you, which was basically the EU wanted every country within the EU to have a common corporate tax rate, because I think Ireland was offering Apple, was it like 2% or something like that?
It was tiny because the way that they did it is that they were allowed to it wasn't just the tax rate, it was what you could write off. So they were allowing them to write off basically everything, and not pursuing them for anything. There was a whole big case there where they owed us 13 billion and all this kind of stuff, and Ireland was campaigning to not have them pay us.
I know, isn't it amazing and stuff? And it was the EU courts who basically told Ireland, you are to basically take that tax money, from Apple, etc. The actual Irish government was protecting the American company over, let's say, the welfare of the people and stuff. It's fascinating, really, isn't it? It's depending on how you look at it.
I don't know if they were protecting the welfare of the people so much as, because overall, you have to look at it as an overall package. If you were coming from a very socialist thing and you look at it and you go, oh, they owe us money and the government is not getting that money, fair enough. But over the long term, keeping those jobs here, keeping that tax rolling into us was more beneficial, I think. So I don't think it was actually the worst thing that we've ever done in Ireland was campaigning to keep that, because what we were doing was campaigning to keep that tax money in the state. We were going to lose 13 billion, but we're going to keep Apple, we're going to keep the jobs, we're going to keep a lot else. And I don't think that that's what's going to happen. I think what's going to happen as well in the near future is oil prices will go down, because I can see that the Americans will, Trump will get more into fracking and energy independence. They will, if they keep fighting with the Russians, they're going to try and keep the price of oil down anyway, because that screws the Russians. So I could see oil prices not going much further really, or wherever. I haven't looked at it because
putting pressure on in the Middle East, which would in itself bring down prices. My view, and once again, if I'm incorrect, please, I have no issue with people correcting me. My understanding is that, whilst Trump backs Israel, he's not a particular fan of Netanyahu. And I wonder whether basically he will put pressure upon him to either A, step aside, or to B, to rein him in, at the same time putting pressure on the Iranians, etc., to draw it to a close. And in doing so, that in itself will start to will send oil prices tumbling as well, I think. So I would agree with you, but I think there's a few different ways that he can get to that as well.
Yeah. The next thing I thought as well is that student debt in the US will not be forgiven now. And that makes total sense to me from his point of view, because it's mostly women, and everybody expected all the women to vote for Camilla, which doesn't seem to have happened. But that would have been his they would have been the people who went to college would have been basically not his tribe at all. So I wouldn't see that student debt forgiveness is going to come in. And I think it's completely against the sort of Republican ethos, of independence and pay your own bills and all this kind of stuff. So I think that that's not going to happen in the US. I can't see that happening, basically. My next point was the weapons companies things that they were going to have to tool up because of the I think the other thing too, which I was worried on the social side of it, was, I could see problems because I could see a return to what you call traditional masculinity in the US, the ideal of it, and I don't think that fixes anything at the moment. So what I was seeing this sort of Marlboro Man cowboy guy doesn't work as well in modern office-based society.
Yeah. Exactly.
As it did. And I think that you've had all the problems with suicide and all these kind of things. And I think that I don't think Harris would have done any better. I think she would have done worse. I mean, there was 84 mentions of girls and women in the Democratic policies and 4 for men. So I don't think they would have done any better. But I could see that there could be a resurgence of this very typical traditional masculinity, which I think going forward is not going to work as well as it did, because it just doesn't take care of a lot of the problems that men have now, So I think that's a thing that's going to, it doesn't work in a modern office environment. Basically, that's the only point I was going to make with that. It'll, on the other side of the social side of it, it'll end diversity programs. He said he's going to end diversity programs, which is something I can't say I think is the worst thing in the world, because I have a son, and as a middle-class white guy, I am the bottom of the pile anyway.
Yeah.
So I think that's not going to be a big change. And the Supreme Court, I think he'll put in if any Supreme Court justices come in, they really are a bottleneck for a lot of stuff. So the more conservative Supreme Court justices you have in, the more of a bottleneck you have for any kind of social change, which is not conservative social change.
No, yeah, no, I agree with you there. So, and I think the Supreme Court already leans conservatively as it is. Once again, please correct me if I'm wrong. That's my superficial take on it, but it is all of these things. It's a culture, as you said right at the start. It is a cultural shift. Right, it is not just a red v blue. It is an absolute cultural shift in the US, and I think we will start to see it resonate throughout the rest of the world as well. Interestingly, when you start to look at the other big issues, is that when Biden won, the Chinese were out of the gate straight first thing, congratulating Biden, and also in their first message was a case of that they were looking forward to renegotiating the trade deal that they had done with Trump, okay, which basically held their feet to the fire. What has been noticeable, if you notice today, is that, of course, even the people don't like him, like Macron, Starmer, they've been out sending messages. That, as far as I'm aware, as when we're doing here, there has still been no message from the Chinese in terms of congratulating Mr. Trump and stuff. Biden was their man, Biden was their man and stuff. Things have changed and what have you. And it'll be interesting to see that China Trump kind of relationship. I think, I could be wrong, but I think Trump just sees it as a purely trade relationship. That's it. He just sees it as a trade relationship, but not necessarily sure about his understanding or his interest in, let's say, the sort of geopolitical depths of it. He just purely sees it as a trade relationship, and he wants to get the best deal. He wants to get the best deal for America. That's his thing. He's always punted himself on the fact of being a great negotiator in business deals, and it's that thing of that old saying, if you've only got a hammer, then every problem looks like a nail, etc. And I suspect the kind of China-Trump relationship might be sort of defined by those measures as well. But maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe I'll be proved wrong. We shall wait.
He's been having a lot of problems recently, and I think that they're going to have a whole big demographic issues with their one-child policy starting to catch up with them and all that kind of stuff. So I think that there's a lot of, they have a lot of problems, and also as well, they've been quite supportive of Russia. Backdoor supportive, outdoor supportive, whatever of Russia, and I think that might not have sat well with them. But that's going to be something that's going to be really interesting, and probably for me the most interesting thing in the next 6 months from this election is how Trump will deal with the Ukraine. Because it's almost written on the thing that he will just turn around and say, give up some land and Russia go home. And I think that would suit Putin. And I think that because it gives him an out, Putin will survive that. He wouldn't survive. I think if they kept on going, and if he actually increased the amount of weapons and support going over to the Russians, I think it would be over for them, for the Russians. Because if you're going to North Korea to get soldiers, you haven't got enough people, and you've cleaned out your prisons, you've cleaned out everything. You're going to eventually end up having to go into mainstream areas like and try and get like Moscow itself, and try and recruit a lot of people. And then also as well, he's been really recruiting cannon fodder because it's lads our age. That's I don't think I do that well in the trench, to be quite honest with you. Not with my feet. Not that I'd actually want to be, at the whole thing of it if I set out to it, but it's not.
The same problem. All the young lads left, and it is lads our age, over 40 or in the trenches and stuff. Yeah. And the thing is, when you're over in your 40s, you're not running away anywhere fast, are you? You're just going to stand and fight because you're not running away because your hips and your knees.
You're not carrying that machine gun; it's too big and heavy. Leave it there.
Indeed, and stuff. So it's I initially thought he'd do a quick rug pull on Zelensky and the Ukrainians. I'm thinking about it now. I'm wondering whether he basically gets them all together and says, "Listen, you've got 6 to 12 months for this to be resolved." In an ideal world, he wants it resolved in his first month or so of his administration, because then it's just a quick, immediate win for him, isn't it? That basically he's brought it, and he's seen as Trump the negotiator and stuff and what have you. But how that will impact Russia, Ukraine, all those European countries, that remains to be seen. Yeah.
If he was there at the beginning of the war, if he was the president at that stage, I think it would have been over 5 minutes before it started. Yeah. But I think after all that's happened as well, it would almost seem like a terrible waste, although I'm not supportive of war in any form. It would almost seem like a terrible waste and a terrible adventure that they all went under, which ends up ultimately in the same place. It's with all those people, poor men mostly in the ground. It's just such a waste.
Ukraine has held on because it has had Western money and Western arm. If that dries up, I just I don't see. I don't see basically anybody else stepping in. The Europeans aren't going to do any more than they are because the woke and useful and weak and stuff and what have you. And for example, for the Poles are spending a fortune on rearming themselves. Why would they give money to Ukraine rather than just buying stuff for themselves? That's I think that's the way they'd be looking at it and stuff. But what I will be intrigued to see is where the American center of interest goes. So historically, it's always been the UK and the US, but I think that we will. This is an opportunity for both Warsaw and for Rome, all right, to basically re-establish themselves as real centers, the kind of real center of decision making in terms of US influence in Europe. Starmer's, especially with his team of Rachel Reeves and Lammy, the bloody Foreign Office guy who was basically slagging off Trump in tweets beforehand, unless Starmer changes the foreign secretary and stuff, which I don't think he will do. Maybe it'll be forced, but I don't think he will do. Then, as I said, I think what we'll see is basically American influence will move towards Warsaw and Rome. But maybe maybe wrong. Maybe a new coalition in Germany. If the German government looks like it could be on its last legs, doesn't it? Maybe a new coalition might kind of re-energize Germany, because Germany's in a terrible. I think Germany's in a terrible state. Others may differ. But yeah, it is going to be a cultural change. It's going to be a huge cultural change, not only in the US, but it is going to have an impact across the world. Stuff, we're going to, and really, ultimately, as traders, all we're looking at is, well, where's the opportunity? Where is the opportunity for us? That's what we care about, isn't it?
It is, but I'll just say with the cultural thing. I mean, if you end up as well, because if we have to build up, if Europe, not necessarily Ireland, but if Europe has to build up its conventional forces, there'll be cultural shift insofar as you're going to get more and more guys going into the military, spending time in the military, and all that kind of stuff. And I think that itself will influence society as time goes on. Because really what you want in a country is what the Swiss have done, which is you really want a large body of partially trained men that you can which you can call on at a moment's notice, which is basically what saved the Ukraine. Because what the Ukraine did is that they had large bodies of partially trained men who owned their own private firearm and who went out and went to war, basically in their runners and jeans. And I think that that's what saved them. And I think that it could end up being a big cultural shift. There could be more militarization here. Places like Finland, for instance, has started to encourage people to buy guns, and they're opening up shooting ranges, government-sponsored shooting ranges, all those types of things. So it'll be very, and at the end of the day, it's cultural and technological shifts that really run the market to a certain extent. As technology changes, what's hot in the stock market and what's not hot in the stock market changes, and as culture changes, what's hot in the stock market and what's not hot in the stock market fundamentally changes. So, all those things are going to be interesting. But the other thing too is I don't think the stock market is going to change. We're not going to suddenly see an end to double bottoms. We're not going to see an end to gap closes, or we're not going to see an end to ranging. So ultimately those things are kind of a little bit whatever. There isn't there's going to be a boom in something.
Well, what it will be, especially for the kind of stock traders, is those of us will remember Trump's first go. He literally, he could come out, you could have a great trade, a great position, and he could come out and tweet something about a company, and that the price of that company would normally fall through the floor, because he normally was basically venting his spleen about companies looking to basically move overseas, etc., stuff like that. And then a couple of lines from 140 characters from Trump was enough to either stop that or have a huge impact on the stock price. And I'll be intrigued to see whether we go through with that, whether he goes back to that kind of style and method of communicating and stuff with the markets, with people, etc.
I don't think. Oh yeah, sorry. I don't
Yeah,
think so.
well,
Actually, quite honest with you, I think that what he's learned an awful lot because when he came into power
yeah,
first, he was playing this. I'm a businessman. I'm a businessman
yeah,
in politics, and he was making a lot of mistakes. Like he was saying stupid things. He says stupid things anyway, some from time to time. And I think he's learned a lot. I think he's got a much stronger team. He's a much better trained media guy now at the moment. So I think he is going to keep his. He will say crazy things because he is Trump at the end of the day. The other thing which I have to say as well is that the media is kind of highlights everything. You know,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
every throwaway comment. You know, he goes off script every so often. Every throwaway comment, it gets highlighted. You know, which they don't do for the other side as much. And then I was listening to one of his media people and being interviewed the last day, and they were going, "Well, some stuff he says we just can't defend it."
yeah. Yeah,
That
yeah.
was a very telling thing. And
I
Musk,
think, like, in some respects, up to a point, up to a certain point, actually, people appreciate the authenticity, having had decades of slick media savvy nobodies. People who will say the right thing to the camera, but actually are just hopeless, won't get anything done. Their personal and private persona are different, and I suspect some of us are kind of like, the Trump you see on Joe Rogan, or the Trump you see on a pedestal is probably the Trump you see at home. And actually, there's I think in a world of so much superficial nonsense, actually people quite appreciate a bit of the authenticity. I think he's turning it to his favor. With people, the media, as you say, they love it because they use it as basically sticks to beat him with. But I think most people are just, they would sooner have a politician who basically was honest with them, even if it was painful, rather than some of the nonsense we've had to put up with over the last couple of decades.
and I think it is absolutely amazing that he won despite the media. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
that's to me is bananas, you know, to a certain extent, like because the media has been so influential over the last whatever we had at first when they were writing stuff on stone tablets. They've had their way for so long, and to see them lose all that influence over people is to me is absolutely astounding. I really think it's one of the most it's probably one of the more astounding things in my lifetime. You know
yeah,
that the media has, because some of the stuff that was coming out, whether you liked him or not, it was just total rubbish
yeah,
that
yeah.
was coming out against him. You know, there's a lot of things that were
I
just
think what
nonsense.
I think what always intrigued me about him, what always intrigued me about Trump was, Washington hates him, the media hates him, Hollywood hates him. Three real centers of gravity absolutely hate him. And yet those three centers of gravities are horrid, terrible, absolutely shockingly bad, whatever you want to call them, bad organizations, bad ecosystems, bad networks, bad parts of the country, etc. And the fact that they always hated him, that always intrigued me, as to like why would these three powerful lobbies, these three powerful parts of America, why would they all hate him? What's going on there? That's something that always intrigued me, even in the run up to the previous election.
I think in some way it's the people that go into it, because I was just thinking 20 years ago, I had stuff to do with people who went on in university who eventually went on to work in the media, and they're all exactly the same type of person. You know, they're all middle class, liberal, whatever. They were a certain type of person, and they would have had beliefs that would have been quite anti-Trump, basically, or anti-Trump-esque. And you know, they also believed that they were right. You know, they really believed that there was, and I think that and I don't think that there was anything. There was no way they were going to ever change their opinion. You know, they were going to go to the wall with that opinion because they felt that they were right in what they were doing. And I think it's even got worse over the last 20 years, that the people who've gone into it have become more left leaning. They're coming out of left leaning universities, you know, and talking to people who are under 30, you know, from university. You know, they're one particular type of person, and I think they became more and more and more distant from the bulk of society. And I think society in its way got bored of having a finger waved at them, you know, like you're a bold boy and you should do this, you know. And I think that that's really what has happened, because they did it too much, where people just went, go home, you're drunk. You know, it's not, and I think that's what won it at the end of the day.
All right. Well, it's probably about time for us to draw to a close, isn't it? Really, and stuff. So, just to kind of sum us up and what have you, I think I stick with my view in the sense that the Trump election will be good for markets. It will be good for the US. It may, it might be good for the world in terms of less wars and peace, but it might be poor. Certainly for me in the UK, it might not be great for UK markets, because I think if you're an entrepreneur now, after all the shenanigans of Rachel Reeves and Starmer's budget last week, if you're thinking of where you're going to start a business in the UK or the US, it's you go into the US. That's and that's the thing. So I think good for markets, good for the world, maybe not necessarily good for the UK because of the political ramifications of Starmer and Labour's nonsense, but also they're diametrically opposed in terms of what they're trying to achieve and how the way they want the world to go and stuff. So that would be my particular view and stuff. Any final comments from yourself, Ian?
Not really. It's took me by surprise. That's literally it. I'm quite pleased because they were saying that it's not democracy, but it actually is democracy. It is actual real democracy, because it is people who are coming together and making their own decisions at the end of the day. And I think it's an amazing time. I think it was a historical morning, to be quite honest with you. And I think it's going to affect us all culturally, financially, spiritually, I don't know, over the next couple of years. And it's I hope it's a good time. I'd be very happy if I was an American this morning, because I think that the country would improve.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. Fabulous. All right. So that's the end of TOGS 30. Next week, we're on to TOGS 31, which is about what do traders want from brokers. So this is kind of defined by its Finance Magnets show. I think in about 2 weeks' time in London. I'm going to be on one of the panels. I've been asked to go down and speak, and the panel I'm speaking on is about, well, what do traders want from banks? What are kind of new trends and stuff that we see in terms of what traders want from brokers, but also what the way traders are going, the way what brokers are offering, etc. So we'll have a conversation about that next week. If you've got any thoughts or considerations or comments and stuff about what you'd like to see from brokers, or what you'd like, what your views are on the overall industry, it would be great to hear us. Okay, put them in the sort of chat box, or drop us an email, etc. We'd be delighted to hear from you. And until that time, listen, have a fabulous trading week, everybody. Trade well, and we'll speak to you soon. Cheers.
bye bye.